Hello dear listener, please subscribe to our channel. Enjoy watching. I'd never seen myself as the type of guy who could be caught off guard. I mean, I was the guy who always kept things under control, the guy who had everything figured out. A steady job, a beautiful wife, a nice home, and a life that others would kill for. It was perfect, or at least, that's what I told myself every day. But then, like any good nightmare, it started with something small, a tiny crack in the glass. Her name was Carla. She was a temp at my office, a woman who looked like she'd walked straight out of a magazine. Smart, efficient, always got the job done. At first, I didn't think much of her. I was married, after all. And Laura, my wife, was everything I ever wanted. Or so I thought. But Carla, something about her rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't her beauty, which was undeniable, nor her intelligence. It was the way she would look at me when she thought no one was watching. That look, the one that lingered a little too long, the one that sent a shiver down my spine. I could feel her eyes on me whenever I walked into the room, and that sense of unease grew with every passing day. And then came the whispers. At first, they were subtle, just little moments I couldn't quite place. But they started to stack up. I'd find Laura's phone face down on the kitchen counter, an unread text message flashing on the screen. From Carla. "You didn't tell him, did you?" It was cryptic, like a punch to the gut. But I wasn't an idiot. I didn't go on the attack right away. I played it cool. That's the thing about being a man of control, you don't act impulsively. You wait. You let them think you're oblivious while you gather your intel. I watched them both closely, Carla at work, and Laura at home, and every time they crossed paths, I could feel the tension. It wasn't long before I had a sinking suspicion. Carla wasn't just some temp. She was something more. Something much worse. So, I did what I do best. I planned. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure they understood the cost of their betrayal. Because that's what it was, right? Laura had been slipping away from me for months, and I had been too blind, too busy with my own life to notice. I couldn't let it slide. Not this time. I hired a private investigator. I didn't trust myself to uncover the truth without losing my cool, so I had someone else do it. His name was Ray. A grizzled guy in his mid-50s with a no-nonsense attitude and a quiet demeanor. I remember when I met him for the first time. He lit a cigarette, squinted at me through the smoke, and said, "You want the truth, you gotta be ready for it." I nodded. I was ready. Ray worked quickly. Within a week, he came back with everything. Carla wasn't just working at my office. She was involved in a financial scam, an insider scheme using her position as a temp to manipulate company accounts. The more Ray dug, the more I realized how deep she was in it. And the more I understood, the more my heart twisted. Laura wasn't just cheating on me emotionally. She was wrapped up in something dangerous, something I could use to destroy both of them. I needed a plan. A plan that would hit them where it hurt most, deep in their pockets and their reputations. But it had to be clever. They couldn't see it coming. Revenge needed to be precise, calculated. A game they never expected to lose. Here's where it got interesting. You see, Laura and I had always talked about buying a cabin in the mountains. It was a dream of ours, quiet, peaceful, a place to escape. But there was one thing Laura didn't know. I had already started the paperwork on a cabin, a place that would be more than just a getaway. It would be the perfect trap. I made sure to play the role of the loving, attentive husband. I booked the weekend getaway, giving Laura all the time she needed to plan. But here's where I turned the tables. I didn't just invite her, I invited Carla, too. At first, Carla seemed confused, but I sold her on the idea of a business retreat. Laura wasn't the brightest when it came to business, but she trusted Carla. She always thought Carla had her best interests at heart, which, in hindsight, is just laughable. The night we arrived at the cabin, I made sure everything was in place. I planted evidence of Carla's financial crimes, emails, bank statements, even photos of her meeting with other shady characters from her business deals. I also made sure to leave a little trail that led to the affair. Because what's a revenge story without a little personal betrayal? And then, I sat back and waited. They both arrived at the cabin a few hours later. Laura was excited, buzzing with energy from the long drive. She wanted to relax, to unwind. Carla, on the other hand, seemed on edge, though she tried to mask it. The tension between the three of us was palpable, but I played my part, easygoing, casual, like nothing was wrong. I smiled at them both, pretending not to notice the flickers of guilt in Carla's eyes, the way Laura avoided looking me directly in the eye. By the time we settled in for the evening, I had everything in place. The moment of truth had arrived. I casually walked into the room, where Carla was sitting alone, scrolling through her phone. I handed her a glass of wine, and she looked up, surprised. That was when I dropped the bombshell. "I know about the scam, Carla," I said, my voice low but steady. "I know about everything." Her face went pale. "What the hell are you talking about?" I smirked, leaning back. "I know you've been using your position to steal from the company. I know about the offshore accounts. And I know you've been sleeping with my wife." She froze, and for a second, it looked like she might bolt. But I wasn't done yet. I walked over to a drawer and pulled out the files Ray had given me, everything. The photos. The bank transfers. The recordings. I laid them out on the table in front of her. "I don't know how you thought you could get away with it," I said, the words rolling off my tongue like ice. "But here's the thing, this isn't just about the money. It's about Laura." I turned to look at my wife, who had entered the room during our exchange. "You're a part of this, too, honey. You knew about this all along." Laura's face turned white as a sheet. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at Carla, who was now on the verge of tears, and then back at me. "I didn't, I swear I didn't," she stammered, but it was too late. I walked over to the phone on the table and pressed a button. "Ray, I think it's time you make your appearance," I said, and before Carla or Laura could even comprehend what was happening, the door flew open. Ray walked in, flanked by two officers. "Ladies, you're under arrest for embezzlement and conspiracy to commit fraud," he said, his tone cold and unbothered. The look on Carla's face as she was cuffed was almost too much to bear. It wasn't just defeat, it was disbelief. The realization that she had lost everything in one fell swoop. But what really shook me to the core was Laura's face. She wasn't just shocked. She was scared. Terrified. And in that moment, I realized the truth, I hadn't just won. I had destroyed everything they had built, and I had done it without lifting a finger. I walked out of the cabin, not looking back. As I stepped into my car, I couldn't help but smile. Because in the end, it wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about winning. And I had won. A week later, as I sat at home, I got a strange call. It was from Ray. "Hey, you didn't think we were done, did you?" he asked, his voice all too familiar. "Done?" I asked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Ray's voice dropped low. "You don't know, do you? Laura wasn't just a victim in all of this. She was the mastermind. She pulled the strings." I froze, every last ounce of confidence draining from me. It turns out, the game had just begun. I sat there, staring at my phone, the words still ringing in my ears. Ray's voice had a detached calmness to it, like he was talking about the weather, not about how everything I thought I destroyed was coming back for me. "She was the mastermind?" "Ray," I said, forcing the words out, my mind struggling to catch up. "What do you mean she was the mastermind? How could she?" Laura, Ray cut in, his voice now more serious, more deliberate, had a plan from the start. She wasn't just a victim in this. She used you, man. You were part of her game. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just that I'd been played, it was the realization that all along, the woman I trusted, the woman I thought I knew, had been manipulating me from the beginning. I felt my pulse quicken. I'd been so sure I'd outsmarted them. I'd been so sure that everything had fallen into place, that my revenge was airtight, that I'd won. But this? This was a game changer. Ray, what are you talking about? I don't get it. Ray sighed. You've been running on blind assumptions, my friend. Laura's been playing both sides. She knew exactly what you'd do. She wanted you to find out about the affair. She wanted you to catch them red-handed. The entire thing was a setup. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck, my chest tightening. No way. She didn't. She did, Ray interrupted. When you hired me, she already knew. She made sure you would. Carla's been a pawn, too. But Laura's been the one pulling the strings from the start. It's all part of a bigger play. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to slam my fist through the wall. But all I could do was sit there in stunned silence. Where is she now? I asked, my voice tight. She's in the wind, Ray replied. She made her move. Left the city yesterday morning. And she's got your money, too. The last part felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't waste any time. I tracked down the last known location of Laura's car and drove like a maniac, ignoring the speed limits, crossing red lights, anything to get to her before she vanished completely. I was dizzy with rage and disbelief. How had I missed this? How had I let her play me for so long? When I got to her apartment, it was empty. The door was cracked open just a little, like she'd left in a hurry. Inside, the place looked stripped. No sign of her personal stuff, nothing that said this had ever been her home. But in the center of the living room, there was a single note. A note with my name on it. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The handwriting was neat, precise. Asterisk, you should have known, sweetheart. You were never the real target. You were just a stepping stone. I needed to break you down so I could take everything. Your life was always just collateral damage. Asterisk. The words blurred in front of my eyes. I thought I was going to pass out right there, in the middle of the empty apartment. Collaterally damaged, those words stuck in my head, replaying over and over again. I'd been played, and not just by Carla, but by Laura, too. She'd wanted to get caught, wanted me to destroy her lover's career, wanted me to bring down the whole damn thing, all so she could slip out with everything. I walked out of the apartment in a daze, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath me. I didn't know what to do next. Ray was right, this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something darker. I spent the next few days tracking down every lead I could find. Laura had covered her tracks well, but not well enough. She hadn't been as careful as she thought. People talk, especially when there's money involved. I eventually found her hiding out in a small town a couple of hours from the city, at a shabby motel, trying to lay low. But she didn't know I was coming. I stood outside the motel room for a long time, my hand resting on the door handle. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then, I heard the faint sound of voices inside. The unmistakable pitch of Laura's laugh, warm and fake, the way it always was when she was playing someone. And another voice, deep and unfamiliar. Carla's? No. It was too deep. I cracked the door open just a sliver, and what I saw through the tiny gap was enough to stop my heart. Laura was sitting across from a man I didn't recognize, but he looked rich, powerful. Well-dressed. He was laughing, too, and they were talking about me. About how I'd taken the bait. How I'd played right into her hands. And how now, with the company's finances wrecked, Laura was ready to move in on the real prize, the company's assets. All of it. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about love. This was about power. And control. And money. I was a pawn. I had been from the start. The entire affair, the betrayal, it wasn't personal. It was all part of a larger game. But I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. I walked away, my mind spinning with the new plan. I had to move quickly. I couldn't let them escape this time. I had one last card to play. The next morning, I showed up at the motel with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, though. Ray had connections in places I hadn't even known existed. I had him set up a meeting with the head of a private investigative firm that specialized in corporate espionage. The man I'd seen in the motel room was someone. And I had an idea of who he might be, but I wasn't sure. What I was sure of, though, was that if I exposed this properly, I could bury Laura, Carla, and their new partner, for good. We walked into the motel room, but Laura wasn't there. She'd run again, but she'd left a trail. And this time, I was ready to follow it. I had everything I needed, evidence, connections, and the one thing she couldn't plan for, my ability to outmaneuver her when it mattered most. I reached for my phone, texted Ray one simple line, *, game over. *. Days passed. News broke that the company had been under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and a series of dirty deals that spanned years. Names were being tossed around. But the real story came out when a whistleblower's tape surfaced, of Laura talking to the mystery man, admitting everything. The twist? The man wasn't just some high-powered investor. He was a criminal, a man whose empire Laura had been trying to infiltrate, to control. Carla had been nothing but a piece of the puzzle, and the way they all moved so quickly once the investigation started, it was clear they had been planning for this day all along. When it was over, Laura was arrested. Carla, too. And the man, the one who had been laughing with her in the motel room? He was caught in a sting operation, and his criminal empire crumbled with him. But the final blow came when the truth about Laura's actions was exposed. She wasn't just in it for the money, she had been manipulating me for years, using me as her stepping stone, pretending to be the loving wife, while she secretly built a life of crime. And me? Well, I'd gotten my revenge. But what I didn't expect was the emptiness that came with it. I sat in my apartment the night after everything collapsed, looking out the window, thinking about what had just happened. I'd won. I'd exposed them. But in the end, the game wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. And as I thought about all the pieces that had fallen into place, I realized one thing: in the end, I was the only one left standing. The real twist? After everything settled, I got one final call. It was from Ray. "Guess what, man?" he said, his voice low and amused. "What now?" I asked, too tired to care. "You might want to check your accounts. Seems like someone's been siphoning money from your bank for months. All the money you thought you'd gotten back. Yeah, it's gone." I felt the floor drop out from under me. And suddenly, I understood. I wasn't the only one who had been played. I stared at my phone, trying to process what Ray had just told me. My stomach churned, the words he'd spoken echoing in my head, each one sharper than the last. Seems like someone's been siphoning money from your bank for months. All the money you thought you'd gotten back. Yeah, it's gone. I went cold, a chill seeping through me, turning my fingers to ice. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I had been so focused on taking down Laura, Carla, and her mysterious partner that I never considered they might still be in control. That the real mastermind hadn't been caught yet. "You're telling me, what? That they've been robbing me all along?" Ray's voice on the other end was calm, too calm. That's exactly what I'm saying. Check your accounts. You're going to want to. It's not just a couple of $100 here and there, either. Whoever's been doing this has been draining you for months. The weight of the words sank in. I'd trusted Ray with the investigation. He'd helped me uncover the affair, the betrayal, the plans. But this? This was something else. Something bigger. Something I hadn't seen coming. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I demanded, the panic in my chest rising. I couldn't. I had to let you figure it out for yourself. You wouldn't have believed me. I slammed the phone down, feeling like I was spiraling. My legs felt weak. I couldn't breathe. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd thought I'd gained, was slipping through my fingers. I wasn't just a pawn anymore. I was a fool, a sucker who'd been played from the start. I spent the next few hours pacing my apartment, my thoughts a jumbled mess. I had to find out who was behind this. Whoever was pulling the strings, whoever had been draining my accounts, they had to be stopped. I opened my laptop, logging into my banking apps with trembling fingers. I scrolled through transaction after transaction, my heart sinking lower with each one. There it was, clear as day, siphons of money, each a little smaller than the last, until it added up to an amount that left my breath stuck in my throat. I was broke. Not just broke, destroyed star. All my assets, gone. My savings, drained. My business finances, plundered. But the transactions were clean. Too clean. No obvious red flags, no obvious trail to follow. And then I saw it, a series of transfers that seemed unrelated at first, scattered between accounts. But when I cross-referenced them, I saw something I didn't expect. It was Laura's name. Not in the literal sense, but in the subtle ways she'd left her mark. The transfer amounts had been routed through an account linked to a business she'd started months ago, a shell company, one that I'd never known about. And now, it was clear, Laura had set me up in the worst way possible. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the whole world down. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, a cold, bitter smile. I wasn't going down like this. I called Ray back, my voice steely. I need you to help me with something. It's time we finish this, for good. What are you thinking? He asked, his voice cautious. I'm going to track down where that money's going. And then, I'm going to shut it all down. Ray was silent for a moment. You're sure about this? It's dangerous. I don't care, I said, my voice low. I've been played too many times. Now, it's their turn. I spent the next few days tracking down every lead. I traced the shell company to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a nondescript building with no signs, no windows, and no obvious connection to anything legitimate. I drove there alone, my gut telling me this was the final piece. If Laura thought she could get away with this, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her. I parked a few blocks away and crept toward the building, my heart pounding in my chest. The windows were dark, the place eerily quiet. I crouched low, trying to get a better look inside. And then I saw them. Laura. Carla. And the man, the real mastermind behind it all. The one I hadn't even considered. They were sitting around a table, laughing. The man was pulling out stacks of money, counting it with a smug grin. Everything's set, he was saying, his voice low and confident. We'll disappear with all of it. The company's assets, the accounts, it's all ours now. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my vision narrowing. This was it. This was the moment. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos, proof that they were still in cahoots, still planning their escape. But I knew I couldn't confront them head-on, not yet. I needed more. Over the next few days, I put the pieces together. I had the photos, the documents, and the knowledge of their next move. It was all coming to a head. I reached out to my contacts in law enforcement and set up a meeting with the FBI. They could take it from here. But when the time came, when the day of the sting operation arrived, it didn't go as planned. I was waiting outside, watching as agents prepared to move in. I was on edge, nervous, but ready. Ready to end it all, ready to get my life back. That's when I saw something that stopped me cold. Laura was walking out of the warehouse, her bags packed, looking happy. Too happy. And beside her, the man I thought was the mastermind, the one who had been pulling the strings, *he* was walking with her, smiling like they'd just won the lottery. I froze, my mind scrambling. What the hell was going on? I pulled out my phone and called Ray. Ray, they're gone. They're walking out with everything. I don't get it. Ray's voice on the other end was calm, too calm. That's because you're still missing the big picture, man. The man you think is the mastermind? He's just a front. Laura's the one who's been playing the long game. She was never going to get caught. She's always been 3 steps ahead of you. My heart sank. What do you mean? Ray laughed, a short, bitter laugh. You didn't think she was just some bored housewife, did you? She's been using you from the start, man. You were always part of her plan. Carla. She's just her backup. The money? It was always going to be hers. And the thing you're not getting? She already knew you'd try to take her down. She already planned for it. I felt the ground beneath me shift. I'd been right all along, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about control. Laura had orchestrated every move, every step, making sure I was the one who would destroy everything, while she walked away with it all. I turned and watched her walk down the street, arm in arm with the man I thought had been her accomplice. They were laughing. They'd won. But I wasn't going to let her get away. It wasn't over yet. It was time for the final move. As Laura and her partner disappeared into the night, I made one last call, to the FBI. I had the final piece to the puzzle. And this time, I was going to make sure she didn't walk away from this one. Months later, the headlines hit. Billionaire couple arrested in $50 million fraud scheme. Laura's name was at the top of the list, her smile now a distant memory. And as for me, I was the one who pulled the trigger, figured out how to take her down, finally. But I learned something through it all: some games are never meant to be won. And in the end, you never really know who the real player is until it's too late. If you leave a comment, tell us what you think about the story you heard. It's important to us and will help us find and tell stories that you find interesting. Thank you for watching us.